Browsing YouTube, it's easy to find multiple retrospectives spanning multiple hours for beloved animated shows that debuted near the early 2000s, like Justice League and Teen Titans, and not to diminish the impact and cultural relevance of those series. But Static Shock seems long overdue for this treatment. Created by Dwayne McDuffie, a founding member of Milestone Comics, may he rest in peace. Dennis Cohen, Michael Davis, and Derek Diggle. I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's names during this deep dive and retrospective. This iconic animated series is based on Static from Milestone Comics. I forgot to turn on the room's light, so the ambiance is going to switch in a second. Bear with me, it takes a while for it to warm up. I apologize if that is visually confusing. Similar to other superhero-themed animated series of the time, Static Shock took a lot of risks by introducing mature topics and scenarios very early on, and I'd say this paid off tremendously well. Static is one of my favorite superheroes ever. Easily top 10, and I guarantee it's because of this show. Static Shock made its debut September 23rd, 2000, and continued with continued with 4 seasons until May 22nd, 2004. Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with Static's comic roots at Milestone, but during the final cut, when I combine all 4 seasons, I plan on comparing the comics to the show when applicable. Before we analyze each episode independently, we're going to briefly summarize the leading cast and bang babies, starting with our hero Static, aka Virgil Hawkins. Voiced by the ever so talented Phil Lamar, you may recognize him from a few roles. Static is our protagonist in every definition. He's intelligent, witty, optimistic, and a little reckless from time to time. He reflects Peter Parker in a few ways, from both getting bullied to the sudden and tragic loss of a loved one. And even the way he displays his intelligence, often utilizing unique skills only those knowledgeable in science and chemistry could apply. Even Static's money problems remind me of the famous Spider-Man, although Statics are usually due to the fact that he's only a freshman in high school. After letting victory after victory go to his head, Static eventually realizes that not only is his best friend Richie's help invaluable, but he learns that being a superhero isn't always as simple as black and white. No pun intended. Next, we have our deuteragonist. Am I saying that right? Richard Osgood Foley, better known as Richie, Static's best friend, and basically his sidekick.
I put a shock to your system.
Instantly, Richie proves his worth as an inventor, coming up with several staples in Static's inventory, like the Static Saucer and the Shock Box. Richie is easygoing, but more structured and responsible than Static, which tends to make them clash on occasion. But no matter what, these two always manage to squash any beef. Richie's attitude and honorable demeanor make it that much more surprising when we learn that his father is extremely racist. Richie's inventive skills are a wonderful foreshadow to the hero he will eventually become, Gear. Now we're going to discuss the supporting cast, leading with Ivan Evans, more commonly known as Ebon. Arguably Static's main antagonist for Season 1, next to Edwin Alva. Ebon is the leader of the Bang Baby gang, the Meta Breed, and attempts to recruit Static before turning on him when Static refuses his offer. Being the leader of a gang before he was affected by the Big Bang, Ebon easily becomes the stereotypical definition of a supervillain. But his shadow powers, in opposition to Static's bright abilities, makes him a fascinating foil against our protagonist.
I'm sending you both on a one-way trip to oblivion. Cover your eyes!
Next, we have Edwin Alva, who has no superpowers, but he is very rich. Basically Static's Lex Luthor, being an affluent, highly intelligent, cold-hearted businessman. Alva is easy to hate for so many reasons, but particularly the way he treats his son. We're introduced to him in the second episode having a shady conversation with the mayor, instantly letting us know that he possesses a lot of influence over Dakota. Next, we have Robert Hawkins, Virgil's stubborn by the book's father. His role is mainly being the concerned parent, but his guidance is crucial to Static's development as a hero. Next, it feels only appropriate to bring up Sharon Hawkins, Static's older sister, who gets a surprising amount of screen time due to her involvement with the on-again off-again villain Rubber Band Man. Next, we have Rubber Band Man, less commonly known as Adam Evans. Initially portrayed as a villain of the day, Rubber Band Man quickly gets a lot of development by showing compassion for Static when he could have easily taken his life, seeking justice against the thieves who wronged him, and proving he's willing to pay for the sins of his past to create a clean future. Next, we have Daisy Watkins, Static's new friend and potential love interest, after he quickly gets over his crush on his classmate, Frida. Daisy is extremely intelligent and feels like a natural addition to our leading duo. We round off our supporting characters with, I'd say, the least important one, Frida Gorin, Static's first love interest, that doesn't really reciprocate the feelings. She's pretty much forgotten a majority of the season, especially after Daisy arrives. Next, we're going to discuss each Bang Baby except for Ebon and Rubber Band Man, because they were already mentioned, leading with Hot Streak. And before I get into his description, I want to speak about the Bang Babies in general for a second. I also really love the term Bang Baby. It's a little silly, but it's very unique and just appropriate for the event that created these babies. A brilliant way the Big Bang was handled was by having the event take place in the middle of a gang war. Most people in gangs don't have the most altruistic nature, and this is a great reason to explain why so many of them turn out villainous. Hot Streak, less commonly known as Francis Stone, was Static's bully before he was affected by the Big Bang, granting him pyrokinesis to match his fiery temper. Hot Streak represents Static's first major victory by not only stopping his first Bang Baby, but putting an end to his tormentor at school, who indirectly is responsible for Static receiving his powers. You'll find out when we discuss that episode. Next, we have Dakota High's track star, Derek, whose metagene monstrously alters his appearance and has a destructive nature. He's a sweet, hardworking student who falls into the most unfortunate circumstance. He appears as a bulky construct composed of violet energy with yellow eyes, forcing him to flee from the public eye. Next, we have the giant germ, because it doesn't have a name. It could be argued that this isn't a Bang Baby, but considering the fact that it displays some level of intelligence and was given life by the Big Bang, I feel like it's fair to include it. If anything, this is the purest form of a Bang Baby. We follow that up with Dwayne, a young boy with the ability to create anything he can imagine that gets manipulated into committing crimes by his evil stepbrother. Next, we have Slipstream, a hefty set man with the power to control the wind. His design is extremely theatrical, but fitting. He comes in with a personality that's larger than life, wearing purple shoulder pads, a matching cape, and specs that would make Cyclops jealous. We follow that up with one of my favorite Bang Babies, Puff, a cute girl with afro puffs to match her aesthetic. Puff has a sharp tongue to match her lethal breath, with the ability to produce acidic gas when she exhales. Alongside knockout gas and who knows what else, Puff can make quite a versatile threat for Static. Her design is simple, a white long sleeve top and baggy jeans, but her silhouette drastically stands out when she transforms her lower body into gas in order to fly, appearing like a genie. Next, we have Neferious. Definitely not a Bang Baby, but since the son of Edwin Alva uses the same gas to generate his powers, it felt appropriate to include him. His casual design isn't anything memorable, but his villainous garb is iconic. It's mostly just a full bodysuit, has a bit of a futuristic design, but it's the purple bubble sprawled throughout that makes it really unique. We follow that up with Replay, a former child star who developed the ability to create copies of himself after the Big Bang. His design is easily forgettable, but his personality definitely makes up for his lack of visual appeal. We round off the Bang Baby segment. We round off the Bang Babies with the last one we get to meet, Tantrum. Basically Static's version of the Hulk, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This character is extremely short-lived, but the giant upper body on top of chicken legs cannot be ignored. Tantrum's name could not be a better fit, since the kid attempted to his teacher for giving him a 99 instead of 100 on one test.
You gave me a 99, but I didn't get anything wrong. You made a grading mistake.
Let me see your essay, Thomas. You made a slight grammatical error. In this sentence, you're using it's in the possessive form, but you've incorrectly placed an apostrophe there.
With all of our characters briefly summarized, let's get into episode 1, Shock to the System. Now first, we need to discuss this banger of an opening. I love every song in the soundtrack for this show, but especially for the opening. The visuals are fantastic, and it gets you so hyped by showing you the lineup of Static's antagonists for the season. My favorite part is when Static sees a villain and runs into an alley really quick to transform. The episode begins with us watching Static take down a group of thugs robbing a warehouse. Even though we only see Static being a superhero for a couple of minutes, it's a great way to catch the audience's attention, showcasing who this hero we're about to meet will become. We segue into Static's origins by spending a day at school with him, where he gets mercilessly bullied by Francis, a character who will officially become a part of Static's rogues gallery. Not only does Francis block Static's attempt to ask the girl he likes out, but he follows Static after class into an alley and jumps him with his gang. Static is saved by the leader of another gang both times, unfortunately sweeping him into their gang war. For this to be the topic of interest in the first episode is not only mature, but very daring for a children's show. We've covered gangbanging, bullying, and gun violence in less than 20 minutes. Yu-Gi-Oh! Couldn't even get guns on screen, so I applaud the team behind the scenes for making it work. The drama is extremely necessary for the plot.
On your feet.
Mr. Pegasus would like to have a few words with you.
Don't move.
Seto Kaiba, you are going to come with us.
Fine.
The two gangs begin warring, and all the chaos causes the chemical tanks in the vicinity to burst, causing the main event to propel our hero's story in motion. The Big Bang. Static quickly discovers his electrokinetic abilities, and after sharing this information with Richie, they decide he should be a superhero.
You could so be a superhero. I could, couldn't I?
Leading us into the classic iconic superhero dress up montage.
Not your best look, chicken legs. Alright, now this is just embarrassing. Yeah, you look like a battery commercial. Next.
I always love these because it's a perfect way to slip in an Easter egg, like this classic Black Lightning suit reference. In the end, we get a glimpse at how others are being affected by the gas, setting up Static's main goal, stopping any Bang Babies from using their powers for harm. Episode 2 is titled Aftershock, and I'd say that's extremely appropriate for the second episode of the series. This episode picks up where we left off before the flashback, which is a lovely way to pace the story. I'd like to point out this clear jab at Marvel's use of the word mutant, compared to DC's equivalent term, metahuman.
Mutant? That's degrading.
You got a better word?
Well, I kind of like metahuman.
Later, at a music store, we witness Static use his abilities in fun, non-combative ways, like playing the music from a CD without the assistance of a CD player.
I'm a human CD player. Even got surround sound.
Hey.
The show kind of dates itself, but honestly, what show doesn't? A Bang Baby emerges, causing the group to flee right into the path of Francis, who also got hit during the Big Bang, giving him pyrokinetic powers. During his assault, Francis tosses a fireball at Static, who defends himself using a trash can lid to block the attack. It's extremely impressive considering Static was in his civilian persona, making him unable to use his powers. It's another hint towards Static's natural prowess as a superhero. Now going by Hot Streak, Static changes and faces his enemy head on, only to be defeated. Everyone makes it sound like Static got utterly wrecked, but I say he put up a great fight, and only failed in the end because he choked, which Static admitted. In the end, several firefighters take Francis down, and it feels very satisfying to watch him go down from several water hoses. During dinner with his family, Static gets to hear public opinion on him from two different perspectives. Sharon is from a generation close to or the same as Static, and considers his public services admirable. while their father, who was clearly from an older generation, feels like Static is just as much of a menace as the other Bang Babies. Later we find Static and Richie spying on a recurring character, and arguably the main antagonist to Static for this season, Edwin Alva, alongside the mayor of Dakota, who is voiced by CCH Pounder, who you may recognize as the voice of Amanda Waller from Justice League the Animated Series. Static uses his powers on the trash can lid to hone in on their conversation, another great example of Static's creativity with his abilities. After following Alva back to his lab, Static ends up getting captured in a glass tube filling with gas. In order to escape, Static uses his powers to increase the pressure until it burst. Another effortless example showcasing Static's intelligence. Static is forced to confront his nemesis again, and we get to witness Static do his iconic charge for the first time. And every time he gets the opportunity, it still gives me chills. Static leads Hotstreak away from the city and into the trees, and ends his reign of terror by submerging him in sewage, giving Hotstreak his just desserts. Episode 3 is titled The Breed. We begin this episode at a track meet, where we get this awesome Easter egg mentioning Lois Lane.
He's coming this way. Maybe I can get an exclusive.
Just chill, Lois Lane.
This is not only a great reference to the wider world of DC, but it makes perfect sense, because Lois Lane is the most famous reporter in the world. People would just know who she is. Static ends up tutoring the track star Derek, since Static has a reputation as the school brain, and we notice Derek is having cramping issues. We quickly learn that he's a Bang Baby, but due to the drastic change in his appearance and the destructive nature of his powers, he's instantly seen as a threat to the public. Derek is easy to feel sorry for because you can tell he's genuinely a great person who randomly was bestowed uncontrollable destructive power. Derek is spirited away by Ebon and manipulated into joining his metagame. Ebon is the arch enemy of Static, if you couldn't tell from the opening. This episode also introduces us to Richie's inventive skills, something that will become much more prevalent later in the series. This is when we're introduced to the Static Saucer, a staple in Static's arsenal. I'm just relieved he doesn't have to use trash can lids anymore. Ebon captures Static and offers to let him join their gang, where we get some fascinating commentary from Talon, not to compare to Marvel. But Ebon's crew has a lot in common with the Morlocks, mutants forced to live underground because their mutation physically affects their appearance in a displeasing way. Static is forced to face the fact that not everyone in the Big Bang got as lucky as him. Even some of the most powerful Bang Babies like Ebon can't live a typical life anymore. Static confronts Derek in order to save him, only to get attacked. And I have to say, I love the way Static used a power cable to break his fall. Also, the Milestone Station we witness in the background is a reference to Milestone Comics, the place Static was conceptualized. Not willing to give up, Static locates Ebon's gang underground and convinces Derek to escape with him. This is the first time we witness Static use extreme light to defeat Ebon, a weakness commonly associated with Umbra Kinesis.
I knew he'd see the light someday.
In the end, Derek volunteers himself to be studied on the metagene, and Static can be proud that he stopped Ebon's gang from gaining a powerful ally. Episode 4 is titled Grounded. We begin this episode with a Bang Baby urchin awaking from a dumpster, and it surprises me how much I like this character's design. I think it's mostly the way he traverses by rolling into a sphere. It's a good way to apply his physical appearance to his meta abilities. But just when you think this is going to be the Bang Baby of the day, a giant germ bursts from the ground to interrupt the two. It reminds me of the Amoeba Boys from the Powerpuff Girls, except actually menacing. It even splits up into 3 different parts, much like the Amoeba Boys later on. This episode also introduces us to another staple in Static's arsenal, the Shock Box, which is basically just a walkie-talkie since cell phones were not nearly as accessible as they are today and definitely not as advanced. Static captures a piece of the lethal amoeba and he decides to analyze it with the school's lab. This is a brilliant way to give our protagonist special equipment to help him as a superhero. He's only a freshman in high school. It's not like he's Jimmy Neutron. In the school, Static and Richie run into Frida and her squad, and they instantly throw Frida under the bus. These are the weakest friends ever. I would have ditched them if I was Frida, but whatever. As our leading duo analyzes the germ, we get a Soul Train reference, a very popular show that ran from October 2nd, 1971 to March 25th, 2006. It featured tons of musical hits and up-and-coming stars. The germ eventually escapes into the vents, and Virgil uses his powers to light a path, something I personally love to see characters with bright powers display. Glimmer does this from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. And Starfire does this in the classic Teen Titans animated show.
Star, can you give us some light? Cyborg!
But I will admit, it feels less impressive when a character wielding pyrokinesis does this. Static battles the amoeba long enough to realize the janitor's cleaning supplies harms it, and he makes it rain on the creature until it's no longer a threat. Once again, saving the day. Episode 5 is appropriately titled, They're Playing My Song. We begin this episode with our introduction to one of Static Shock's best supporting characters, Rubber Band Man, a recurring villain who sometimes plays the hero role. Upon first glance, he can seem a bit tacky.
Sir, we're being followed.
With a name that's a little too on the nose, and a color scheme that's nowhere near menacing. But despite this aesthetic, he truly cements himself as a reputable threat with a mountain of depth. Rubber Band Man is on the hunt for the people responsible for stealing his music, hence the title of the episode, taking the aggressive approach. Rubber Band Man begins harassing anyone related to the problem, which ultimately puts him into conflict with Static. Also, I'd like to mention really quick, I love the Tupac reference through Ice Pack. Rubber Band Man proves to be a fantastic foil to Static, being composed of living rubber, which insulates electricity. This causes Static to waste all of his power in one blow, giving Rubber Band Man the opportunity to end his life. But he decides to spare Static, knowing he's not the one who wronged him. After Richie brings Static to their new headquarters, which will actually become very cool later in the series. But at this point, it's just an abandoned gas station. Static makes a comment on how being a superhero doesn't pay the bills, but definitely costs money. Repairing equipment is an aspect of superhero culture I'd love to see shined on more. To remedy this, his father forces him to get a job that his friends tease him about, and although I know it was done in the spirit of fun, I've never found it amusing to demean someone for actually having a job, regardless of whatever the profession is. I don't care if you're selling kitty cat on the street, at least you're making your bank. I recently watched a video about a man who has worked for McDonald's for nearly 50 years and continuously collected their memorabilia throughout the years, creating one of the most valuable time capsules. And he couldn't be more proud of his job. You never know who is living their best life just because their aspirations aren't what society has led you to believe.
What's the matter? 13 hours of sleep not enough for you?
Keep it up, and I'll stop bringing you those milk bones you enjoy so much.
Did he just call her a... Anyways, Rubber Band Man locates his target by impersonating a woman with his shape-shifting abilities, letting us know that his powers are pretty malleable. And after he learns the whereabouts of the person truly responsible for stealing his music, Rubber Band Man strikes only to be interrupted yet again by our protagonist during this conflict. Static uses the money in the vault as a decoy to trick Rubber Band Man, a storytelling battle tactic I'm extremely fond of. Using the environment is a great way to show a character's prowess and situational awareness.
Kawarimi, ancient ninja art of misdirection. All you need is a thing some idiot could mistake you for, and some idiot.
In the end, Static does try to reason with Rubber Band Man, but he refuses, stating that he can't allow such disrespect to go unpunished, a mindset that tends to plague the gangbanger lifestyle. In the end, Static prevails by tangling up Rubber Band Man in a merry-go-round, and he learns soon after that he lost his job since he abandoned his position to stop Rubber Band Man. Even though you get praised by the crowds, being a superhero often feels like a thankless job. I forgot about the light. Episode 6 is titled the new kid. This episode always rubbed me wrong as a kid. Not because it's poorly crafted, but because it possesses two of the creepiest, unlikable characters in the cast. We're also introduced to another fantastic supporting character, Daisy. We will be seeing a lot more of her. I always wanted Virgil to end up with her as a kid, and honestly, I don't remember if he does, so we're gonna find out as we continue to get through this retrospective. We also find out that the two disrespectful buddies, who address each other in the strangest informal way, or perhaps I should say very formal, are the teachers of this class.
I see the grunt found his way to class, Mr. Specs.
He gets a gold star, Mr. Trapper.
Because this school is so super special, they consider other students teaching other students a wise idea. The instant I saw Mr. Specs and Mr. Trapper, my blood boiled with nostalgia. I abhorred them. And you'll see why. Not only are they complete douchebags to Static for no reason on their first encounter, but they clearly have nefarious hearts. All around, they're just both pretty gross. While under attack by what Static deems Mr. Roboto, he runs out of power and we're introduced to the first instance. Static recharges from a power source that leads into his Sailor Moon-esque montage. It's extremely fun and very good use of the animation. It's stock footage, but it doesn't feel like it. We quickly find out that the creepy friend twins are working for Alva, specifically to capture Static. This episode really solidifies Alva as a recurring villain and does a great job solving an issue that tends to arise with an arch nemesis. Why doesn't this person just kill them? Needing the subject alive for research is nowhere near close to our original, but it gets the job done. The creepy friend twins release their creation on Static, and it proves to be quite a challenge. Static's foes so far have all been a challenge on their own, but this enemy, specifically designed to negate all of Static's skills, is truly a test of might. Static legitimately feels like he's in danger. In the end, Static using Alva's home against him, as well as Alva's body as a personal shield, gave Daisy and the other students enough time to shut down the power. The episode ends with Daisy leaving the super smart high-tech school and going to public school to join Richie and Static. Episode 7 is titled Child's Play. We start this episode off with a water fountain transforming into strawberry soda, and everyone begins drinking from it. I understand the fountain was transformed into something drinkable, but does it account for the coins at the bottom? This just doesn't seem sanitary to me, especially after multiple people started drinking from it at once. We're introduced to a kid returning after participating in reform school that's needlessly rude to Static, and Daisy has the most hilarious comment.
So where has he been?
Reform school.
Hope he bought a round-trip ticket.
We're later introduced to a young kid that's obviously a bang baby, with the ability to transform any object into whatever he can imagine after getting teased by his peers. The kid, whose name is Dwayne, creates a monster from a video game to prove them wrong. And I love how Static recognized the game the creature was from. This kid, who was affected by the Big Bang, is easy to feel sorry for. Not only was Dwayne near a potentially dangerous event, but his older brother that he clearly cherishes does everything in his power to demean the kid. The way he points out that they're stepbrothers makes me want to break his nose every time, which is every chance he gets.
Mr. Hawkins, this is Aaron. He's my brother.
Step brother. Who is he anyway? Your brother? Step brother.
I know you're tight, you and your bro.
And we're not tight. And he's not my brother. He's just a step brother.
Okay.
There's a moment where Dwayne wants food and he lets his brother Aaron know, but Aaron shoves the responsibility on Dwayne's mother. I interpreted Dwayne bringing the food up as an offer for Aaron, not as a request to get fed. Considering his powers and the fact that he wasn't reluctant to use the power near Aaron, Dwayne probably would have done it in front of his face if Aaron was paying any attention to him. The more perspectives we get from civilians, the more we realize that even though Static is a hero and likely the most notable bang baby, the majority of them are seen as freaks, and even worse, threats. This is made very apparent through the eyes of Dwayne's mother. Later, Aaron convinces Dwayne to rob a bank by creating a sumo wrestler, and during this scuffle, Static gets drenched in water, even though it was under situational circumstances. It was nice to see Static's main weakness on display. When he's charged up and drenched in water, Static will short circuit. A fantastic logical drawback to electrokinesis. Directly after this fiasco, the brothers hit up a mall to steal its merchandise. Watching Aaron constantly, successfully manipulate his little brother into doing his criminal bidding is so low. I honestly feel like Aaron deserves his own costume. Static once again recognizes the creature Dwayne created, and his weeby knowledge assists him in defeating the monster. It could be a small allusion to the Martian Manhunter, who is also a Martian with a weakness to fire. Aaron ultimately can't keep up the facade of manipulation, and Dwayne has a change of heart after Static finds the right words to get through to him. Okay, episode 8 is titled Sons of the Father, and that is a play on the term Sins of the Father, which is very appropriate for the episode we're about to explore. Even if you haven't watched Static Shock in your youth or as a whole, there is a great chance that you've heard about the racist Static Shock episode, which is this one. This is one of the heaviest episodes in season 1 next to the season finale that highlights Static's mother's death. We begin with Ebon and his metagang getting thrashed in embarrassing fashion by who other than Static, of course. He demonstrates a new ability called the Nova Ball. That's definitely giving Chidori energy.
After all this time, you'd think I'd be tired of cleaning up after you guys. No way! I call that my Nova Ball, Ebon.
I don't know which one came first. And we also get the most iconic background character moment of season 1 with this old lady and the pepper spray.
Today, lady, sakes, live woman can't go shopping without bumping into hoodlums every which way. Here it is.
We join our main duo relaxing at Static's house, and it's made apparent that Richie is becoming a little overzealous when it comes to Static's superhero career, as well as constantly being involved in Static's personal life. This leads Static to question why he's not more involved in Richie's personal life, and Richie eases the tension by inviting Static to his house. This is when the episode officially takes a turn for the worse, not in plotting, pacing, character development, or even entertainment value. I mean, it's about to get extremely uncomfortable due to racism. It's impressive that Richie chose a date that his racist father wouldn't be home, but in truth he should have just been honest with Static. This situation potentially puts Static in danger. It's not uncommon for people with mindsets like that to get violent. If Static wanted to take that risk after being made aware, then more power to him, I guess. I understand Richie doesn't want Static or his family to think differently of him for the sins of his father, but any rational and level-headed person would understand that Richie is not his father. Clearly, if anything, he's a shining example of those who don't let the awful mindsets of their relatives affect the way they view other groups of people. This strikes me as particularly interesting because in the comics, Richie is secretly gay. Trey, DL, undercover, whatever you want to call it. And Static was homophobic before Richie made him see the error of his ways, especially for someone who's inspired to be a superhero. Homophobia isn't a racial issue, but it has affected races in unique ways. The Black community has been notorious for their lack of tolerance for the LGBTQ plus community, and at the time this comic was published, this was extremely prevalent. So awkward. Oh I didn't realize I didn't have my iconic hat on for that entire time. Well, it wasn't that long, but I'm not redoing that. So you got to see what's underneath the hat for a little bit. This is my head wrap. I hope it didn't scare you away. It just keeps my hair nice and untangled. Anyways, Back to the retrospective. After dinner, Richie desperately tries to explain his father's actions, and Static maturely just takes it as his dad having a bad day. People can have those. But on his way to brush his teeth, Static overhears some extremely racist comments. PG, of course, for the target audience, but still just as uncomfortable to witness.
And now I see why Richie acts like a hood, Maggie. That kid's a bad influence. All his kind are.
Keep your voice down.
It's bad enough I gotta deal with them all day long. Now one of them's in my house.
Static obviously doesn't feel comfortable staying at Richie's after this event, and this causes Richie to run away from home. It's sad to see how much you can tell on Richie and his mother's expressions, how ashamed they are of the male of this household's racist views. Or I should say the eldest male, the father of the household. Richie's a male too. During his time on the streets, Richie shows potential not only without Static over his shoulder, but with no powers against two bang babies. He's gearing up to be a superhero. Oh gosh, that was so tacky, but I have to leave it in. We get to see that Ebon is furious over Talon's capture at the beginning of this episode. And I'd say this is officially when we realize why Ebon is the leader of his group. He's a bit rash and hot-headed, but he's also very tactical and cunning when he's focused. He's learned on too many occasions that he can't take down Static with brute force, and chose another way to hurt our hero. Robert and Richie's dad, who will remain nameless, or I guess I'll just say he'll be referred to as Richie's dad, go searching through old rundown group homes. And we hear Richie's dad state that his viewpoints on the black community weren't specifically about Static, as if that's somehow supposed to make Robert feel better. It's fascinating how a racist can justify their behavior by exempting the few they consider good, but condemning the culture as a whole. This type of racism is also seen in the Teen Titans episode Trock, which was handled more maturely in my opinion, a series we might cover someday. Comment below if you want that. Here's actually the poll, because Teen Titans almost won, but this poll is the reason why Static's happening first at least. Richie gets kidnapped by Ebon after he discovers that Richie is Static's best friend. In the end, Static is able to save them with the assistance of both of their fathers. And Richie's dad is magically no longer racist from this point forward. I understand that a traumatic experience or a significant event can instantly change a person's views, but this is extremely rare because this is a kid's show. Richie's dad magically learns his lesson in one day, when in reality, this can take a lot of time and education. Once again, I feel like the episode from Teen Titans Trock handled this topic more maturely, but this episode is fantastic regardless. Episode 9 is titled The Winds of Change. This episode is when we're introduced to Heavy C, a bang baby that gets the ability to control the wind, otherwise known as aerokinesis, and a notorious bully. He always left a lasting impression on me as a kid, and I'm not sure why, but I think it's because I'd never seen a character with wind powers be a husky person, and it's honestly pretty iconic. This episode is when we also see Richie and Static's personalities clash. Richie is more structured, while Static likes to go with the flow. During Static's battle with the self-proclaimed Slipstream, Static using his powers to change the traffic lights was a brilliant touch that not only displayed his intelligence, but his awareness of the civilians. Richie gets aggravated that Static won't heed his advice and takes matters into his own hands. I know Richie is just trying to help, and normally his help is very useful. But what made him think taking down the water slide was a good idea on the man who can literally control the wind? It should be assumed he could fly, but whatever. After the two have a falling out, Daisy is awkwardly placed in the middle of them. Later, Static and Daisy run into Richie at a comic store, and we get to see the Plant Man comic, which was a construct created by Dwayne earlier this season. A nice detail that could be a small allusion towards Swamp Thing, another DC character. Static ends up facing Slipstream again, only to run out of power. Richie sees this on the news and decides to go to help out with the Zap Caps he presented Static at the beginning of the episode. In one embarrassing motion, Richie drops a majority of the Zap Caps, but still has two tucked away. Static is able to use them to recharge, going into his Super Saiyan Charge Up montage. And defeat Slipstream while making amends with his best friend. This is probably my least favorite episode of the season, but not a bad one. Episode 10 is titled Bent Out of Shape. I just want to put a quick disclaimer. If my energy seems off, I've been recording for 5 hours and I'm just a little tired. So hopefully I can still get the enthusiasm into this deep dive. But if you notice a dip in my energy levels, that is why. Let's get into it. Before we get into the main plot, I have to mention this minor change in Daisy's design. For some reason, the animators decided to take out her hair loops. And this bothers me because that tiny detail gave her so much personality. And now she's walking around with the stereotypical This episode is definitely one that stayed with me into my adult life. We learned that Rubber Band Man can mimic other people to a degree, and he used this ability to create a new persona so he could continue pursuing his music career. He creates Stringer, a fantastic clue to his true identity, and moves on with his life, no longer being a criminal. He even begins dating Sharon. During his show, Stringer is notified that the fireworks can be a hazard and force his team to go through with it anyway, causing a fire that leads into a massive panic. Static is able to save the attendees, and after attempting to investigate Stringer, we learn that he's really Rubber Band Man's new identity. I'd like to take this opportunity to mention that Stringer is the comic book counterpart to this character, but they were revamped to become Rubber Band Man for the show. This episode also introduces us to Puff, a character whose power disturbed me as a child and still gives me chills today because Rubber Band Man is famous and Sharon is publicly his girlfriend. When he's revealed to the public as Rubber Band Man, Static and his family continuously get harassed by paparazzi and reporters. Understandably frustrated, Static takes out his anger on his sister by pointing out the many villainous traits of Rubber Band Man, causing Sharon to have an emotional breakdown.
Stringer's not a criminal.
And he does a pretty good imitation of one. Like when he tried to shake down that music producer for the money he owed him. Or when he fought Static. Or when...
I understand that Static has a personal issue with Rubber Band Man, but that's still Sharon's boyfriend. You don't say things like that in front of a person's partner during a time of crisis and uncertainty. Rubber Band Man gets hell-bent on revealing Static's identity to the world, as revenge for revealing his own identity. And during this pursuit, Rubber Band Man disguises himself as multiple everyday objects in order to spy on our hero. I have a few questions about the limits of Rubber Band Man's power. Clearly, he can mimic most shapes, including something as complex as another person. He can even do women to a degree. This was difficult for Miss Martian in the opposite aspect from Young Justice, because mimicking boys was more challenging for her. And I'd say this is a fun and fair hurdle for any shapeshifter to experience. Rubber Band Man can also change his colors, something characters like Elastigirl from The Incredibles and Plastic Man cannot achieve. But when Rubber Band Man mimics everyday items, it seems difficult, if not impossible, for him to mimic their colors. We know he has limits that can be overcome, and it's another reason why Rubber Band Man is so much fun as a supporting character. I'm curious if he can mimic everyday items with exact precision, with enough practice, or possibly even change his density. I feel like he can already do this to some degree, because he can clearly create clothes, and can definitely appear as flesh and bone because he's in a physical relationship with Sharon. I'd also like to point out really fast how much fun it is to watch Rubber Band Man traverse. He transforms into wheels, balls, springs, literally anything that will help him get to his location with ease. Sharon attempts to hide Rubber Band Man from Static and Richie, only to be quickly discovered by Static, sitting on the Rubber Band Man's color-schemed chair. You'd think Static would be cautious of purple by this point. Puff overhears Sharon plan to get police assistance, and takes that opportunity to use a disguise to capture Rubber Band Man. A great example of excellent setup and writing. This plan ultimately fails, and in the end, Rubber Band Man begins displaying more heroic behavior.
Guess we should dig those two out, huh?
Well, that's how the good guys do things.
Episode 11 is titled Junior. We start at the center, celebrating the construction of a new gymnasium. And I have to point out how much I love Sharon's sophisticated look. But the important part of this scene is the absence of Static, who was on duty much to the disappointment of his father. It's very Peter Parker how much Static's superhero career interferes with his personal life. In this episode, we're introduced to Edwin Alva Jr., which says a lot about the expectations put on this kid by his esteemed, prolific father. Edwin Alva Jr. isn't a bang baby, but he figures out a way to ingest the gas with a method that temporarily grants him superpowers. He can even use multiple powers at once. On his first encounter with Static, he introduces himself as neferious. And literally my whole life, until doing this retrospective, I thought he was saying, I'm nefarious. Like I'm nefarious, like my name is nefarious.
I don't believe we've been introduced.
I'm nefarious.
You're nefarious?
I'm nefarious. It's my name.
It means many forms.
Bro, I go to public school. Latin's an elective.
I went to public school like Static. Funny enough, this joke is in the show, commented on by Static, and I still never got the reference. Neferious discovers Static's true identity and threatens to reveal it to the world, if the hero doesn't stay out of his way, of course. Unable to let neferious run rampant, Static ends up clashing with him again in a temporary alliance with his father, and in order to stop the soldiers piloting mech suits attacking neferious, Static performs his first EMP, and during this time his charging theme song plays, making this an epic moment. Desperate to bring down the building, neferious burst all the bubbles of gas that granted him power at once, and is unable to control it. This resulted in his petrification, but in the end, we witness his eyes glow, hinting at the possibility of his return. Episode 12 is titled Replay. If I'm off center, or if anything's not in frame properly, I apologize. This is the last take. I just didn't want to do a quality preview. Anyways.
A robbery. Make that robberies, bro. And they're color coordinated too.
Richie literally spoke my mind. In this episode, we meet Replay, a bang baby with duplication powers. Now, we've probably all seen the duplication power multiple times in different franchises, but this is the first time I've seen the power give the clones enough agency to want to live.
Get out of my sight.
Most of the time, the clones are completely under the control of the original. It's almost like a psychic thing, and typically they don't feel pain. After Static follows Replay back to his hideout, Static and this new enemy end up clashing, and when their powers merged, Replay indirectly made a clone of Static that was completely under his control. This gives us the opportunity to explore the classic evil twin trope, with Replay using his copy of Static to wreak havoc, while the real Static is forced to clear his name. Side note, Richie is made for not giving Static the benefit of the doubt.
Call me crazy, but maybe Replay somehow cloned me. You're right, bro. You're crazy.
All the crazy they've seen, and that was hard to believe? After a few successful adventures, Replay takes the fake Static's mask off, revealing literal Static underneath where flesh would normally be exposed. This is a nice touch to distinguish the two, and has a very meta effect with his name being Static and the thing being static on his face, and Replay is a former child star, and his power has a mild connection to television. It just feels like that, especially with the staticky effect of his clones. Later in the episode, Replay threatens Static by holding the power of his reputation over his head. It's moments like this when the limitations of children's programming become apparent. If Replay wanted to trash Static's reputation so badly, why did he knock out the guard instead of kill him? Small plot hole, but it's perfectly fine. Surprisingly, this episode reminds me of one of my favorite episodes from Sailor Moon. When Zoisite impersonated Sailor Moon to either gain her attention or also tarnish her reputation. It's been a long time, so I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Where'd you come from?
I'm Sailor Moon, champion of justice!
With the assistance of Richie, Static is able to broadcast his battle with Replay and his evil twin, clearing his reputation right before defeating Replay. Out of all of the season 1 episodes, this one feels the most like the villain of the day. I don't expect to see Replay ever again. It doesn't do anything that affects the overall story or world too much, but it's still a very fun episode. Episode 13 is titled Tantrum, and this is our season 1 finale. This episode is surprisingly somber. The focus is Static's mother, who we are well aware has passed. Static, unfortunately, hasn't processed her death fully. He is only 14 years old, so that's something to keep in mind. And the effects of not fully dealing with her death is starting to interfere with his personal life. Just like earlier this season when Static saved a bridge, I don't know if I noted that, but I'll make sure to show it. We witness him perform another classic superhero feat by saving a train. A passenger that was saved thanked Static by saying saying his mother must be really proud of him, which triggered his unresolved issues due to her passing. On patrol to clear his head, Static crosses paths with our bang baby of the day, who's basically Static's version of the Hulk. We quickly learn that it's one of Static's classmates who is obsessed with getting perfect grades. This kid really tried to take his teacher's life for giving him a 99 instead of 100 on one quiz. Truth be told, the logic was petty because it was the tiniest grammatical error, literally an apostrophe off from a perfect score. But still, he did overreact, to say the least. Later, we spot Static and Richie watching home movies that happen to have his mother in them. And watching Static miss her so much is surprisingly mature for a kid's show. While watching the home movie, Static remembers a method that his mother used to quell his anger and applies that to Tantrum in order to stop his reign of terror. We close this episode with Static speaking a few sincere words in honor of his mother, while a church choir leads us into a credit roll that is a slideshow about his mom. Most season finales end with a huge spectacle, especially for animation and especially for animated shows aimed towards children. All the heroes and villains clash, or the main villain ramps up the stakes 100%. But Static Shock took a risk by letting us get to know him on a much deeper level. And perhaps that's why this character is forever ingrained in so many people's memories.
I've learned something just recently that's very important. My mother's physical being may be gone, but her spirit is still very much alive within me. And it always will be. Thank you.
Thank you for reaching the end of my Season 1 deep dive analysis and retrospective of the awesome animated series Static Shock. I will be doing the same thing for Seasons 2 through 4, just be patient, I promise it's coming out. This is a personal passion of mine because there really needs to be a huge deep dive retrospective honoring this series, and I couldn't be more honored and happy that I saw the opportunity. If you would like to help me in a monetary way, you can always join my Patreon. The link is in the description box down below. You can become a YouTube member, or you can give me super thanks or anything like that if you choose to help in a monetary way. Anything and everything helps me tremendously. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons: Kirsten Letts, Clever Bee, Mortonette Stevens, and Jerry Jenkins. You are the greatest supporters in the world. Thank you so much for being my Wonder Patrons, my highest tier. I cannot do this without the support of each and every one of you. If you would like to help me in a non-monetary way, like the video, leave a comment, leave 10, leave several, share it. Just click the link for share button. That helps tremendously. And of course, hitting the notifications bell, but ultimately, subscribing helps the most. Make sure you're subscribed if you already were, because sometimes YouTube unsubscribes you. Do all the YouTube things, and that helps me a lot. And if you want to take another step to help me in a non-monetary way, you can always follow me on my multiple social media accounts that will be linked on the screen and in the description box down below. I have so much fun over there until TikTok ultimately ends up getting banned. We do live watch parties where we watch movies and anime and whatever we feel like. It's a ton of fun over there. Instagram is where I post a lot of my workout and pictures, and I'm shirtless over there doing sexy stuff sometimes. Not really on my main page. I've got like 3 Instagram accounts, but if you want to follow me over there for that, that's a great place to see my goods. I have a lot planned for this channel. I have so much to do all the time, but it's worth it. And it's a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this deep dive, and I really hope it's successful so I don't feel like I'm putting a lot of effort into something that's not paying back. But either way, it's something I feel compelled to do, so it's going to get done. I do fashion analysis here. There's a bunch of reactions on the channel. I don't do reactions often anymore, but I may do some independent episode reactions to certain things. I just don't do whole reactions to series anymore, except for Arcane. When Arcane Season 2 comes out, I will be reacting to each episode independently. But yeah, I mostly do fashion analysis for animated characters now. You can check those out. Superpowers explained, and whatever else I can think of. If you have any ideas, please comment them down below. I'm really excited to do a deep dive into the rest of this series. It's been so much fun to revisit and analyze, and I hope you learned something and had a lot of fun here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. I'm Josh with a Z, and I really hope to see you next time. Have a great day, night, whatever time it is, but just stay beautiful.